This podcast is being powered by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hey y'all, welcome back to Mentally a Badass. Today, my guest, his name is Steven, and he's from Colorado, and which is awesome that we're going to be talking about his experience as an assistant principal at a charter school, which I'm super excited because I've actually been wanting to talk to somebody in the school system about mental health, but I haven't really found anybody, but I think this is just meant to be. So yeah, Steve, if you want to just like introduce yourself, I technically already did, but if there's like any introduction that you want to do, we're welcome to do that. But if not, you can just kind of like jump in and just talk about your journey with mental health as like in the school system and being an assistant principal. I believe he wants to talk about your journey, correct?
Yeah, no, that sounds great, Justine. And I think you did a good job of the introduction. I am an assistant principal for a charter school here in Denver, Colorado. I'm from California and from Redondo Beach, where I also was a assistant principal at a different charter network out there in California. But yeah, I think, in listening to your podcast, I'm excited to kind of talk about the mental health piece in education because like you kind of framed here, I think it is super important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm super excited to like when we talk about later on the conversation about like the resources, like in depth, because I even told you, like when we were talking on Instagram, when I was in high school, I didn't have any resources, like inside resources. I did see a therapist that my mom took me to because I'm just super like happy that I was able to have that privilege that my parents were able to afford to bring me to therapy when I was having like my basically my mental breakdowns in like high school. And I just like came to my mom, and I literally came to my mom and I was like, "Hi mom, I'm very sad." And then she's like, "Okay, we'll get you a therapist." But yeah, from my knowledge, there's really nothing that we had in high school. I mean, we had like a guidance counselor, of course, if you like need to go to them for certain things, but and of course they had like the bullying like pictures throughout the school or whatever, but there wasn't really anything to really think about it. We did have like a girl empowerment club, but it wasn't really like led pretty well because not really many people joined it. But yeah, so what would you like to talk about first? Do you want to talk about your personal journey, or would you like to talk about the resources? Up to you.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll just share a little bit of context for me. I think that'll be useful. Obviously we all walk around with biases, so I'm definitely going to be a little biased just from my own experience. So I'll share some of that. And then, I would love to, obviously, like you kind of prefaced here, share a little bit about my perspective as someone who's in the school system and has been for just near a decade here. And we could dive into that. But, in thinking about my own mental health, I'm someone who has struggled with depression and anxiety for a pretty decent amount of my life. I would say maybe consciously for a lesser amount, but definitely at least underlying for the majority of my life. And I think now as an adult and as someone who leads young people, I've taken it upon myself to really dig into that space and just try to become a lot more self-aware. So, I think all of the normal things, I know you and I have talked about this, but, things like self-talk and finding outlets through art and meditation and gratitude journaling. I think those are all things that have been really helpful for me. And then, in my role as an assistant principal, so much of my work now is really helping those that I serve in my leadership to try to, find ways to promote and sustain their own mental well-being. And that's really the work.
Mhm.
I oftentimes get asked from people outside of education, like, oh, you're an assistant principal. What does that actually mean? uh, I think, so much of the work is sure the nuts and bolts, right? And content and curriculum and making those decisions. But so much of how I kind of see the work is whether it's, teachers or leaders that I'm coaching or students that I serve. I spend much of my time, I would say at least 60 to 70% of my time on a daily basis is really just spent connecting and kind of caring for others and helping them find tools to promote their own mental health. Because I think if we're assuming that our teachers and our leaders have all the strategies already in place, we're fooling ourselves. So I think there's still
Yeah.
a ton of work to be done, even with the adults that are leading our children on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's like really nice to hear that you spend a lot of your time connecting with students. When I, like, honestly, when I was in high school, I didn't really have a relationship with my assistant principal or principal. We didn't really do anything with, like, put a hand out and like, hey, let's talk or this or that. And they're mostly focused on like the disciplinary part of it.
Sure.
The but I did have a teacher in high school, it was my chorus teacher, who truly cared about his students, and he really did get me through a lot of my hard times and such. I literally took chorus every single year of high school for two reasons. One, I like singing; it's an easy A, and then all, but mostly like I loved my teacher there. I really looked forward to going to that class just because of that and his care for his students and his like personality and how he makes it so much fun. And it literally wasn't just a class for me. He was probably maybe the first a, a authority figure, I guess, mentor wise, that I really looked up to. And I even like, I remember, I don't know what I was upset about that one day, but I was like venting to him. And then one thing that he told me that really stuck with me is that he was like, Justine, you are in high school, you are in a fishbowl. And then once you graduate, then that's when you're going to go into the ocean. And just wait until you graduate from this fishbowl. You're going to see so many different experiences, and your whole life is going to be so different. And then whatever's happening right now is truly not going to matter. And, at that time, I was a teenager and like I didn't really like think in that way. And now as an adult, I do think that way, but now I like truly understand what he meant. For me, like I grew up in a small town in New Jersey, and to be completely honest, the stigma's pretty big still there. I currently live in Orlando, Florida right now, where they're more open. I work for Disney, so Disney is open to like all things in diversity, and I truly feel cared for with my leadership team. I honestly speak about my mental health with them, like, so like I feel super comfortable. Like I literally walk into their office and like cry with them, like
Yeah.
not with them, like they wouldn't cry, but like I feel like I can talk with them.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty much with that. And I'm so glad, I'm so grateful that I had it in my life. But I I can probably go on and on, like my school with the school system in my hometown area, that it really didn't have like the resources that it should have had. Yeah.
Yeah, just it's interesting that you bring that up because I think you and I, just from the way you've described your school experience and your hometown, I think we grew up in very different areas and settings. And I would also be willing to say that the school systems, maybe on both ends, didn't do a great job in terms of preparing the young people that are on campus on a daily basis in their social emotional learning. Like for me, I grew up in Redondo Beach, California, and it's Southern California. It's very liberal. It's very open to
Mm-hmm.
having these conversations around mental health, and it's a pretty affluent area. Like I grew up with a ton of privilege, and I'm a
Mm-hmm.
white male, so I also grew up with that privilege that I just walk around with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely this belief that, like, in my mind anyway, for mental health in schools, that it's just another instance of kind of like the haves and have nots, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure that's honestly largely pretty true. And, you know, like I said, growing up in Redondo Beach, largely affluent area, really strong school system. And I've also spent most of my time as a professional in education in Title I schools. In Title I schools, if you're unfamiliar, it's basically, in summary, like the government is supporting those lower income students that make up the student population through things like, you know, free and reduced lunch or limited school fees or whatever it might be. And I think it's just important to note that, you know, both the schools that I attended as a student in Redondo Beach and then also the schools that I've been a part of the community as a professional, I think no one at either of those school communities would say that they've, you know, figured it out, if you will, when it comes to mental health and social emotional learning for kids. And I think that honestly is regardless of socioeconomic status or neighborhood that the school exists in. I think honestly just across the board, you know, that we're not doing enough. Uh,
Yeah.
and you know, having said that, I think I now especially am just so fortunate to work with and serve some just amazing teachers. So I just want to name that I don't think that this is like a skill gap or a will gap for the majority of educators. I, you know, I would probably argue the opposite, right? Teachers and school communities, in large part, they know that social emotional learning is vital and that it needs to be improved. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think there's any need or even room for a debate there. But what I will say, you know, especially now, like in a global pandemic, our teachers are heroes. However,
Yeah.
they're, you know, they're heroes that are underfunded, underappreciated, overworked in just so many instances. So, you
Mm-hmm.
know, while it's definitely the want is there and the understanding of the importance of social emotional learning is there, I think honestly, you know, where I am in Colorado, we're, you know, in the bottom 10% of funding for schools in our state. We just need more funding. That's definitely one. And I would also argue that we just need more student voices at the, you know, like the proverbial table. It, we can't have adults making decisions on a daily basis that are going to affect students unless we're getting student
Mm-hmm.
input. Uh,
Yeah.
right. And, you know, I think, you know, if we think about 2020, which, you know, arguably one of the worst years of my life anyway.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much for everybody,
Yeah.
honestly. Well, okay, not everybody. I've heard some people have like for personal things they've had like good luck with things, but
Sure.
majority, I think we can all share the universal thing with the whole like pandemic
Yeah,
and all of that. We can share that.
definitely. Right. Tons of silver linings, I think, right? Like, gosh, I'm so grateful and fortunate to like have a place to live and have a really great partner who is
Yeah, I've
supportive.
been very lucky for me too that I didn't get laid off. There was like 20 something thousand people from Disney that got laid off.
Wow.
And I wasn't one of them.
But what, you know, what I was, you know, what I'm getting to here is ultimately, like, I think if we've, as we've seen, like these huge human rights movements and you know, Black Lives Matter,
Mhm.
whatever it may be, if we've learned anything, it's really that our young people are the catalyst for change, right? And I
Definitely.
think like working at a school more and more on a daily basis, honestly, I think what I've learned is that as an adult, I just kind of need to get the hell out of the way. Young people lead the way. There's great ideas there as a sounding board and for guidance. But I honestly think the same could be said as we think about social emotional learning, right? Obviously, we're professionals as educators. We've been in this, and our heart is in the right place. But if we're not getting input from students, I can't see a world where we start to turn the corner here for more effective social emotional learning strategies and programs across our country.
Yeah, definitely. I do like how you put that in perspective. It's like how you said, like, we need to move out of the way. We're there for guidance, but we need the students, the one to actually have the ideas and have a voice. And I was just going to bring up that there were actually these people who approached me. They just had like a new app. It was a mental health app. I forget exactly what it did. I think it was like working like a social media thing. But yeah, it was a new app, and then they reached out to me on Instagram asking to like interview me because I do like I'm a mental health advocate and I guess they just want to like have a conversation with me. And then so I got on a Zoom call with them and then realized that they actually are like fresh out of high school and some were in high school.
Hmm.
So I thought that was extremely impressive
Yeah.
that these people were stepping forward and decided to build this app. They built it in quarantine. And I was talking to these people and I didn't like realize like I did not realize what great like that they were like under 18 or like just 18 because the way they like talk and the way they like how mature they are and present themselves, I thought they were like, I don't know, like around my age, but they did look really young. So it was kind of like a thing where they look young, like they could be in high school, but the way that they like present themselves makes it seem like they're around like my age.
Yeah.
So I thought that was impressive that these kids are doing that. That sounds weird me saying kids. Like I'm like I'm at this point in my life where I'm saying that now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, on a daily basis, and obviously we've been in a remote kind of teaching and school space for quite some time here, over a year. But on a daily basis, when I have the chance to talk to kids, I think I feel pretty similar to what you just described, really just taken aback. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really easy to get into kind of like this, get off my lawn type mindset as an adult.
I I feel like that in my apartment complex and people are like so loud
Yeah.
outside and like I had one person like blasting I'm working from home now and I had this one guy like blasting his music in his car like if it's a block party kind of thing and I'm patient but after like 20 something minutes and I had to like I take calls and stuff so I need to be on the phone with people. I had to go outside and be like, hi, can you like turn it down?
Yeah.
And I'm so awkward doing that because it's just like, oh god, I'm hitting that part of my life right now.
Yeah, the tables have turned for sure.
I mean, the guy was like my age too. Like he wasn't a
Yeah.
kid. Yeah, he was just not really being, courteous and kind of being a little disrespectful. But yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah. I think, like, honestly though, right? I mean, if we have that mindset of like, I guess we could just coin it today, the get off my lawn mindset. Um,
I
if we have that mindset, then I think it's really hard for us to like really give young people an opportunity to lead. But I think once we do step back, I would say pretty often you're gonna kind of feel and see what you described, right? I mean, we've never had a generation of young people that have more resources to information. And it's not an
exactly.
opinion, right? Like that's just fact. And if
Yeah,
if we if we just kind of sweep that under the rug and don't capitalize on that, I think it's a huge miss for our country, for our generation. I think it's a huge miss to just kind of walk that back and not lean into just the immense amount of information and knowledge that our young people are exposed to on a daily basis.
yeah. And social media is literally so powerful. And also like you said with the whole like having access to resources like they literally can just have an Alexa and just like ask, oh my god, I'm next to my Alexa, I don't want her to say anything, um and just like ask a quick question and like they'll get their answer and it's just like they have all of these resources when they can literally like I said with those people, the people from high school, like they were building an app. Like that's insane.
Yeah.
I always want to do an app, but I don't know how to build an app. I'll have to hire somebody, and that's super expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have all these like app ideas for mental health, but I haven't like actually done it or anything like that. I'm the kind of person where I have so many ideas and projects, but I need to like take a step back and be like, okay, I need to like take a step back. I need to write things down and actually like know how I'm gonna go about it. Like I'm literally thinking about hiring like a for like cause I do YouTube too, and I've been like haven't been posting because I haven't been really inspired. But I have some YouTube friends who are actually they're starting to hire assistants.
Wow.
Yeah, so and I was like, I don't know if I could afford an assistant,
Yeah.
because my life is so crazy right now. Like I have so many things that I'm doing and I still put more on my plate just because I don't know, I'm just like that. But now I'm like, okay, I need to stop now.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about like hiring like an assistant for like 4 hours a week or something like something small.
Hmm.
And, like and plan out like what we're gonna do in like those 4 hours for like YouTube related stuff.
Maybe
But
we can
yeah, I'm
get
going off topic
maybe we
again.
can get that guy who's playing the music too loud. It'll kind of kill two birds with one
Oh my god, right? Oh, I know. Definitely perfect
stone.
person.
Yeah, I think yeah, and I mean we could probably talk about young people for quite some time here. But just one thing I do want to say, I think in talking about, like our current generation of 18 and under, let's say, it's
Hmm.
just so interesting. I think one thing that is, funny as you think about like at the school level. And I was actually on a phone call a couple of weeks back with one of my former students who's now going to graduate from UC Berkeley, and she's a
Hmm.
badass. I by her on a daily basis. But I was joking around with her because, she's like advocating for, Black Lives Matter. She's advocating for women's rights. She's advocating for so many things that are just like so close to home. And she's out and
Yeah.
doing it. And at the same time, she's like nervous to give a presentation in her class. And I think like
Oh my gosh, I'm kind of like that too, not
it's
gonna
just
lie.
so funny to me that like this generation are like fearless, courageous. If it's like a mental health issue, or if it's a human rights issue, like this is the generation that gets out in the streets and makes change. And then they'll need to present like a marketing project, and they're like, oh, I don't know, I don't know if I could do this. So I think it's just an interesting kind of
It's
dynamic that exists.
It's true. That's literally me too. Like I'm like very vocal on social media. I'm like courageous about opening up for like my own mental health, and I like do all these projects and things. But like if you put me in like a classroom and do a presentation, I'll be like stuttering and nervous, and I'll like about to like pass
Yeah,
out, or I had a oh my goodness. Yeah, that is literally me too. I don't know. I don't really know. I guess because we know we're getting graded on something, so we get
yeah, maybe.
nervous.
I mean, if you compare the two, though, right? Like, I don't know, and this is coming from an educator, right? Like, probably the PC answer here is like it's really important that you learn everything in all your classes and absorb all the knowledge. But really, I mean, school is for that at some level, but largely it is for like developing who you are going to be as a human being and really like figuring that out for
Mm-hmm.
yourself. So, it's something that I think is interesting. And but yeah, it very well, maybe it is just the grade thing. You might be right.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing too is that like people like they know they're being watched or know they're being like judged for a grade. And then also like for a marketing thing, if you're pitching something to like a higher up, that's another thing too. It's like they're watching, like like if you don't do well, then it's like it's not gonna work out. And like it's just like also like the fear of
Mm,
rejection and like the fear of a bad grade when we're out here being like, courageous and doing this and this and this. I guess it can be like fear that it's not going to work out, but it's just like I feel like a whole different idea and concept of that. I mean, I do know also like for me putting myself on the internet, like I know I'm going to get like hate comments and stuff like that. Like one of my TikToks went viral and it had to do like during the election time because I was really vocal around the election
mhm.
time, and I would get the opposite party attacking me um on TikTok, and I literally had probably like hundreds of like comments of like people bashing me.
Ugh.
And honestly, like I didn't really care about that TikTok because it was just like I know they're gonna if they're on the opposite party, obviously they're gonna disagree with me and then bash me and stuff. But some of the comments were kind of funny. The TikTok was just me saying like I'm Cuban and like I'm not a Trump supporter kind of thing. I know a lot of Cubans
Mhm.
are. And then some people told me to get on a raft and go back to Cuba.
Jeez. Oh,
And then I was like, I'm not even born there, but
ugh.
okay.
Yeah. Well,
It was just like funny
yeah.
comments.
I mean,
But
I'm
yeah.
glad that you're letting it just kind of like roll off your back. But I think like those we could probably have a 6-hour podcast talking about hate comments and
Oh,
politics and all of those.
oh my god. I like try so hard to like oh my gosh, so many of my episodes that I've recently have recorded, I keep accidentally bringing politics in accidentally because there was two people that were in different
Yeah.
countries. So I was really curious to see how they see
Yeah.
us. And I was like, "Oh boy, I'm bringing politics in again." It's just I'm very
Yeah.
curious. Like Like, how do you look? Like, how do you see us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. And honestly, like, I joke around that we could probably talk about politics forever, but it's also a privilege
Uh,
not to talk about politics, right? Because I think like for me, you know, obviously, and I'll share my politics. I'm not a Trump supporter. Um,
oh, that's a
that'll be,
relief.
that'll be a hint to my political leanings here.
That would be a
Yeah.
little awkward the rest of the podcast.
Um,
Well, I'm assuming you wouldn't have said I'm a Trump supporter like towards the end.
yeah.
You're like, okay. I mean, I'm not the kind of person to hate on Trump supporters. Like some of my friends are Trump supporters. I'm not the kind of person like if you're a Trump supporter, we're not friends ever again. Especially like, if I have a history of friendship with that person. I just don't talk about it. I ignore their post. I just turn a blind eye. But it's like then there's like the people who are I feel like there's a difference between a Republican, a Trump supporter, and a cult follower.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's true. I think like, what I've been wrestling with for the last 4 years, right, is how do I, stand up for the people who are adversely affected by the last 4 years, by our presidency and by racism and by ableism and sexism, right? Whatever ism you want to choose, because like I said at the beginning, like I'm white facing male who walks around with a ton of privilege. And I think, in talking
Yeah.
about politics, it always makes me think about like, yeah, it would be easier to just not talk about politics with someone. And really, regardless of who's president, I'm not going to be negatively affected in so many spaces. So like, I think, I'm glad to hear that you're talking about politics on this podcast, because like, it's kind of our duty to do that and to not let it.
Yeah.
Um, Justine, the other day you asked me about like perfectionism, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been kind of like on a journey of self-awareness in regards to like just my professional career and my personal life. I think like self-awareness is something that I've really been trying to lean into. But ever since you had like talked about perfectionism a little bit, I've been thinking about like, when did my perfectionism start? It's been just like
Mm-hmm.
a pretty crazy week to think about that. I was thinking about it as recently as this morning, and I identified that I think honestly my perfectionism started when I was in Little League, and I thought that was really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And I mean, I don't know how much you identify as like a perfectionist at any level.
Oh, I'm not at all.
Well,
Like if I was a perfectionist, we would literally have like, okay, question here is going to be this to this. Like I would like honestly, my podcast is okay. This is a topic. This we're going to talk about, and then we just
yeah,
go with the flow. And you know what? There's going to be times where I'm going to go all over the place, and sometimes I'm going to say and this and this and this, but I'm not going to stress myself over
yeah.
that. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm not a
Oh,
perfectionist at all.
good
I
for
mean,
you.
I feel like no, I'm
Yeah.
not.
I honestly,
I
I
guess.
honestly think that like at some, like everybody in my mind anyway, and maybe this is the mind of a perfectionist, but in my mind, I feel like most people walking around on a daily basis are walking around with perfectionist tendencies. And like, I honestly, there's probably some that like we're unaware of, right? Like, I think for me, and I was talking about Little League, I'll share a little bit about that, but I think for me, like my version of perfectionism shows up in kind of like tying my product, whatever that is, right? Like a project at work or a conversation that I'm having or an at bat in Little League, or since I'm old now and at bat in like a co-ed softball game, whatever it is, like
Mhm.
tying that product to my self-worth and like to the value that I bring. I think that's where perfectionism comes up for me. And like, that Little League example, right? Like it was a cycle, and it would just compound on each other over and over again, right? Like I'm going to play a baseball game. Maybe I strike out. I'm really upset because I'm tying that product, the strikeout, to my self-worth. So I throw my helmet in the dugout. Now I'm embarrassed. I go out and play defense and I make an error, right? And I think like it
Mhm.
really compounds. And I think today when I'm at work, for instance, I'm a lot more aware of this tendency. Uh, and I've done a
Mhm.
lot of work in trying to like recognize when it's happening, right? Like, what does my body feel like? What am I thinking about when I am tying product to self-worth and when it's not going well? So I've done a lot of work to really be able to identify it. And then obviously the goal there is to consciously kind of choose to respond differently. Uh, but
Mhm.
I would say it still happens weekly, um, to where, I roll out, I don't know, an initiative at work, and someone says like, "Oh, did you forget about this?" And I'm like, "Well, I guess, I guess I'm not worthy to be in this spot anymore," right? Like those are like the first thoughts that come into your head. So I
Yeah.
think that has definitely been a struggle, as we steer this podcast back to mental health and away from politics. But like that is definitely something that's front of mind for me on a daily basis.
I think for me, I don't like, I'm not a perfectionist, but I do have like a really unhealthy obsession with like, I mean, being productive is good, obviously, but like I feel like I always need to be productive in a way. And I like always pack my schedule, or if I feel like if I'm not being productive, that I'm just wasting my
Mhm.
life kind
Mhm.
of thing. And then that just burns me out. And but also is kind of like part of mania too. Like for me, I couldn't even list the amount of stuff that I do. So like I do this podcast, I do YouTube, I work full time, I sell wine with One Hope, and I fundraise. What else do I do? I had a whole list and everything. Oh, I drive Uber Eats, which I'm gonna do later tonight to make some, extra money. I was doing writing, but I kind of like I put that in the back burner.
Advocate for
Um,
above the stigma.
exactly. Advocate for above the stigma. I can do that mentorship program. I really would love to do that,
Yeah,
by the
that'd be
way.
awesome.
That's definitely something I want to build. Yeah, so that too. And so like today, oh, I'm also in school.
Just a little add on there.
Why do I keep forgetting that? I'm in school. I think it's just because I take one class.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm in school for social media. I have a for social media graduate certificate for University of Florida. So yeah, I'm doing that. And right before I got on this recording with you, I was doing my
Mm,
homework. So like, and then before my homework, I was on a Zoom call with like two of my really good friends who are YouTubers to like basically talk with each other and like hype each other up. And we're gonna do weekly calls to get to be basically be like accountability people, accountability partners that are like actually, pumping out those YouTube videos and being productive. And then before that, I was recording another podcast. And then before that, I what did I do before that? I
the
was promoting the
marathon.
podcast. I can't. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just always doing something, and I don't know. I like being busy, I guess.
Yeah.
And I just think another thing too is that I'm choosing to go off the non-traditional way of career. Like for me, I have a degree in psychology. I went to Rowan University and I graduated with a degree in psychology. But I didn't move forward to like get my master's and go down that route. More because, well, a couple of reasons. One, I don't want to get into debt. And then two, I like have my own issues where and I'm also super empathetic. So I feel like if I'm like, I can obviously be there for people and advocate and like, help them and stuff like that and listen to them, but like I don't want to put myself in a professional setting where I don't want it to like I say the wrong thing or it backfires. So I don't know who I'm gonna come across. You know what I mean? Like I know it's very serious, and I just don't want to put myself in that position where I'm gonna accidentally cry with them.
Yeah.
It's not professional, and I have to like. For me, I like the casual way of me talking to people, being there for them. If I cry with them, I cry with them. Like, but for if I was being a therapist or a psychiatrist, I kind of have to put myself on stop and they have to be talking to me. Like I can't like share things, you know what I mean? Like it'd be unprofessional. I mean, like I can share in a certain way, but like you have to be careful how you talk to them. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. It's heavy
And
work for sure.
yeah, so that's where I just feel like I wouldn't do well in that career path. It's because I know who I am and I know that I wouldn't be a good
Mm.
therapist. I could be a good person to like talk to and like mentor and like help you get through and stuff and relate, but I don't feel like I should be put in a position where I would be like, if I'm a psychiatrist, like giving people the wrong medication or like misjudging, or you know what I mean? Like it can be very dangerous, and I just don't trust myself enough to do that. So I went off of that. And then with Disney, I actually work. Okay, so this is actually really funny. I started working for Disney on the Disney College program, and I literally applied for the program just like for like I was just like, oh, I'm not gonna get it. At that time, I had a low self, like a really low self esteem around that time.
Mm,
So I just like applied, and I'm like, I'm not gonna get it. Like it's Disney, and it's like a competitive program. Like I'm not good enough, you know.
mm.
And so I literally I'm like, you know what? It's not gonna hurt to apply, you know. So I just put in the application, and then I took a nap because college, and then I woke up, and then I woke up to an email saying that I was moved to the next round. And the next round is the web based interview. So I made sure I went to the library because I don't trust the Wi Fi, the college Wi Fi.
Mhm.
Because if that thing crashes, it's like you're out. Like they actually don't have any exceptions for that.
Wow.
Yeah, I've heard that people have internet crash and they will like call and ask and they'll like say no. So I made sure I went to the library to make sure I had a good connection. So I took that, and then after I took the test, it's like, oh, you move into the phone interview, and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, I made it to the last round. What? So I scheduled my phone interview, and then I made sure I drove home for the weekend. I lived like 2 hours from the school. I drove home for the weekend because I don't trust my roommates that they're gonna come in like and start screaming. You know what I mean? And so I went home and I told my parents, I was like, guys, can you guys like not be in the house between this hour? Because I want to make sure like it's I think that's what like, the perfectionist kind of came out, is that like I'm the kind of person where I guess I will have that mindset if I know like, okay, this is my time, like I can't mess this interview up, you know what I mean? Because this could be a really cool opportunity. So I did the interview, and then about a week later they emailed me and they said I'm accepted, and I was like, I was in Walgreens at the time, and I literally get the email and I started freaking out in the aisle.
Wow.
And yeah, and then I called my dad. I called my mom first, but she didn't answer. I called my dad, and I was like, Dad, I got into the college program. He's like, Really? I was like, Wow, gee, thanks, Dad. And then my mom was like, my mom was like happy for me, but also kind of sad at the same time because like she was like, oh crap, she's gonna move to Florida, and my mom is like a mom, and she's like, oh man, she's gonna be all the way in Florida, and so I was like, I had to really think about it, and I was like, okay, but I also want to graduate on time because I have to take a semester off. So I talked with like my advisor, and like we had to do a certain plan for me to like graduate on time. So I ended up still graduating in 4 years, which was really nice. And then I went to Florida and I did a college program, and I just like fell in love with the company, and it's just such a unique company to work for. And honestly, and then like getting into the college program, I think like usually around like 20,000 people apply apparently, and then like only like four to 5,000 get in.
Wow.
So I know. So I was like, I feel kind of cool, and that really boosted my self esteem, like by a lot. I was like, wow, I'm actually above average in a way.
I think, yeah, I mean, I'm wondering, Justine, like as you talk about that, like I am, I hear some of like what I was describing even come up a little bit, like, like even how like that can like boost self-esteem, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I just think that like
No, it's
that's what I
great.
mean. Like,
Definitely.
I think we all walk around with some level of like perfectionist tendencies, especially, right? Like for you, that was something that you were like really passionate about. And then for me, right, in education, like that's something I'm super passionate about. So I think that's great. And I think that's also a trigger for perfectionist tendencies to kind of pop up, because if you don't care about it, then who cares how it goes? But if you do care about it a ton, then I think like that's where you could fall into the trap of like, well, if this doesn't go
Mm-hmm.
well, then I guess I'm not enough. So it's daily work. All of that said, it's daily work for me anyway to be to be in a
Yeah.
place where like I just understand and know that I am enough, regardless of what I'm doing at work, what I'm doing in my personal life, whatever it is.
Yeah. And then yeah, I was going to the part where how like I became obsessed with being productive kind of thing.
Mm,
So yes, I mean I do work for Disney, and I love the company, but I'm not like crazy about the 9 to 5 lifestyle. To be completely honest, I feel like I'm more of an entrepreneurship mindset. And so yeah, so I mean, I discovered I'm like, okay, I love Disney. I want to work for that company, and I was completely content with that mindset. But then now, like being working like 2 years being full time, I'm realizing, okay, I can't do the 9 to 5 kind of lifestyle. Like I still honestly I would still want to work for Disney as like a part-time gig, just like to still be a part of that community, because it is honestly a phenomenal community. And I know a lot of people would like literally die to work for this company. And I know I'm super privileged and very lucky that I able to work for such a great company. So I don't ever want to like actually leave the company. I just don't want to be doing a typical office job. And that's just me personally. I know everyone's different.
Yeah.
But for me, like I like to work on projects. I like to basically be building something from the bottom and up. And then also I do like love the idea of passive income. And then also being able to like make my own schedule and be flexible with traveling. And then I also have my family, all my family lives in New Jersey. Like my parents, my sister, my niece, my nephew, they all live in New Jersey. And then like with my job, like I could only have so many days off from work. And it could be hard for me to like visit my family.
Mm.
And so if I can able to like be more flexible in my schedule and work on my own, like my own time kind of thing, then I can visit my family more. Because I realize, like living here in Florida, like there's been times where like I really miss my family and I feel a little lonely. And it's like, I mean, I have friends here, of course, and my coworkers and such, but there's a good period of time that I was like away from my family for like 6 months because of the pandemic, and then like it started getting to me, and I felt really lonely. And but if I'm able to like have that time, I can kind of get the best of both worlds. I can still see my family a lot. I can still live in Florida, because I don't like living in Jersey because I hate the cold. I hate the cold. I love Florida. I love the state. I honestly want to move to California, but like it's so expensive. uh, but yeah, that's pretty much like the reason why I feel like I have to be like literally grinding all the time to get where I want to be, because like what I want to achieve to be like self-employed entrepreneur is like not easy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And I mean, great for you, just in that like you have figured out, at some level anyway, like what it is that you want to do. I think a lot of people haven't even got that far. So the grind, in that regard will definitely be worth it.
Yeah, and then some people even like I'm gonna say my family members, but like just a lot of people who just don't get what I'm doing. I mean, in the beginning, I think people probably thought I was wasting my
Mm.
time. Cause I started doing YouTube in 2016, and that's kind of when I discovered it, that I love content creating. I love social media. So that's like really where it started. But now I'm just like doing other things, and like I said, my podcast is does help me a little bit with finances. Well, it just started, but like not really. But yeah, it's just like a lot of, I just want to have like basically my goal in life is to have multiple streams of income, and to be able to live life to fullest pretty
Yeah.
much.
And I think, I know we started talking about like education system and schooling and all of those pieces. And, I don't think it is surprising that you and a lot of people that graduate from schools in the United States feel pressure to do that 9 to 5 style career, right? Like, I mean, ultimately, that's kind of like what we're trained to do through
Exactly.
through the school
Exactly.
system. So, I think maybe less so now. I think especially in a time of this pandemic when we are seeing just the huge benefits of technology, and maybe that's opening the eyes of some of the people in charge at school systems across the country. But I think that is not surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do feel like it is changing a lot. 'Cause I think a lot of people, especially I think maybe it's changing more. This is like my idea of it, is that a lot of people on social media are like entrepreneurs, and with the whole generation of people going viral on social media, and then all the opportunity of making a passive income, it's just like, I mean, let's talk about these TikTokers. That these people are just literally like, these were just teenagers on TikTok in high school just having fun on social media. Now they're
Yeah.
millionaires. And I just think that people want that, because I mean, who doesn't want to like obviously make TikToks for a living, and then like, You know what I mean? Like, yeah. But a lot, and also YouTubers too, like people make that a living, and it's really fun and it's very fulfilling, you know. And it's like you have creative control, and you literally, the sky is the limit, and you can do whatever you want, kind of thing, and then like make a living off it. And I feel like that's everybody's dream. But then also I feel like, but then people also have to understand that it's not easy. Like, I've been literally doing YouTube since 2016, busting my butt, and I haven't really gotten like where I want to be. It's fine. It'll come when it comes. I'm just still working on it. I'm not giving up. And it's been like almost five years, I think I've been on
Yeah.
YouTube. Yeah. So it's just, people want a certain lifestyle, but also like people like they I know they want it, but it's just like they have to understand that it's also like really
Yeah.
hard, like super hard.
Yeah.
Unless you get lucky, like Charlie D'Amelio on TikTok, then it's
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, that's such a small percentage, right? It's,
yeah. No, she just got super lucky. I mean, not like she's not talented. She just got really
yeah.
lucky. I mean, 100 million followers. What?
Well,
Well, like I wish I could just come famous randomly over doing the
yeah.
renegade.
I mean, to be fair, I have like probably 150 followers on Instagram, so it's pretty similar. So I mean, I get it. I have just as much fame.
I mean, hey, it took me a lot to get my 1,400, which I lost a follower today, so
Oh no.
1,399.
Oh man. I was thinking about, and I don't necessarily have an answer, but you asked me about like what are the hopes for like mental health and social emotional learning in schools. I think
Mm-hmm.
the real answer is like I don't know. I don't necessarily know where to go. I think it's not a decision that one person's going to make, but like a few things that I was thinking about as we talk about like funding, and the wheels are turning now, wondering around like, how do we tap into social media, and maybe that increases funding at some level. But I think like,
Mm-hmm.
student-led initiatives, I think, are going to be number one. That's definitely something, obviously, that we've talked a lot about, even just today on this podcast, and then increase funding. But I think the biggest thing is for me is probably going to be like the meshing of content with social emotional learning. I think like right
Yeah.
now they live in contrast in so many different spaces, right? Like, and that's just not how it happens in the real world. Like I could be at work, doing my job, doing the content, if you will, and then like be rocked by something social emotional that comes in, and I'm not able to like, I can't say like, oh, actually I'm working on content right now. Like that's just not how that goes. So I think like that's probably the biggest one that I've spent time thinking about, like how do we do just a better job and a more efficient job of tying in social emotional learning to every content, to every class, because I think that is honestly, that's what real life looks like. They're not compartmentalized often.
Yeah. I was thinking, cause you know how like I don't know if I asked you this already on Instagram. I really have no idea, but you know how they have like, yeah, they have like sex ed, health classes and stuff. Like it would be so nice if they have like a mental health
Yeah.
class. You know what I mean? Like that's something as like mandatory, because I mean, hey, we have physical health class. Like why not mental health
Yeah.
class? As like making it as like mandatory. Because in my high school we had psychology class, and but you it was an elective,
Mm-hmm.
and it'd be great if it can like be mandatory. But I do know like they would have to, obviously it'd be another class we'll have to fund, and they'll have to find somebody who specializes in mental health. Probably has to be like someone like a psychiatrist or a therapist or whatever. I don't really know those logistics of
Yeah.
that. But I just feel like it would definitely be like valuable to students and beneficial. I just feel like that's like part of the stigma is that, and what we say is that mental health is just as important as physical
Mm-hmm.
health. And it's like, can we like bring that to the actual school system? Because that's like starting to learn at an early age is really going to change our
Yeah.
future. You know what I mean? Like that's where we have to like focus on is the school system, because that's where it all
Yeah,
starts.
you're right. And honestly, like I don't even know. if it needs to be its own class to, to the point I was making earlier, like I think here's an example. The network that I lead and serve in right now has a pretty robust advisory program that takes place on a daily basis. And
Mm-hmm.
we have just some amazing teachers and leaders that have built in really intentional social emotional learning opportunities into that advisory space. And sure, it's not the hour long on a daily basis like maybe a class would be, but I think if we're able even to carve out a spot like that on a daily basis to just to even have students answer the question like, how are you really feeling today? What are you grateful for today?
Yeah.
Like, what are the goals for today? Like just some.
Yeah, I get that. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
I think that is probably like a good intermediary um, step, and something that I like I said, I'm probably a little biased here, but I've seen a lot of good work done at the school that I'm currently working at.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. I really do want to take a visit to my old high school and see if anything has changed. I don't know. I honestly might do that. Oh wow, we've been talking for 53 minutes.
Whoops.
So, I mean, we definitely are should have more conversations off the podcast because I do know we keep going. We're gonna be going into like 3 hours of this
Sure,
podcast.
sure.
Yeah, so I'm gonna end it soon. But is there anything else you want to say before I do that, like to the
To
people?
the people. I think the one thing or the two things I would say, number one, and I already said this earlier, but I think, I have a front row seat on a daily basis to see the work that teachers are doing as a school administrator. And I think if we gave teachers the opportunity to really, have time and space and funding to lean into social emotional learning for our students, they would jump at that chance. And like I said
Yeah.
earlier, I don't think it's a skill issue. I don't think it's a will issue. I think if it existed, if the time and the space and the funding existed, our teachers are the right people to lead in this. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one thing. And then the other thing is just, I think, if you are listening and you are an educator or you're a parent to a student who's in a school system, I think just like having the conversation, and it could start with like, hey, how are you doing? And if the answer is fine,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the next question is, how are you really doing? Or, digging a
Yeah.
little deeper. But I think like those are the two big things for educators, for families, for school communities, just to start the conversation.
Yeah, that's where it all begins to start in the conversation. Yeah, definitely. Well, I just want to say I really do appreciate you being on here. I honestly think this was such a great conversation. I can't wait to listen to it again. Well, when I put it up, I'm gonna like listen to my own podcast and be like, "Oh, this is like really good information." No, seriously, I really think it's great. I think it's such a good conversation. I really do appreciate you being here, Stephen. But I am going to end this podcast right here. And thanks so much for listening, everybody. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day, evening, afternoon, wherever you guys are. And I'll probably post every single Saturday at noon Eastern Standard Time. So make sure to look out for the next episode next week. But yeah, thanks for listening.